I'm going to do something a little different today. I've spent multiple shows today talking about breaking news, and frankly, it's exhausting. So I'm going to talk about a particular person whose story is so intertwined with this current moment, who tried over and over throughout the decades to warn America about itself, whose ideas were once seen as radical and outlandish and, dare I say, violent, who now, decades removed, are becoming mainstream. I'm going to talk today about the brilliant, iconic, living legend who is Angela Davis, and what she told us back in the 1960s, what she's been telling us for decades about who America is and the path that it was on, and what we can learn today, including about Palestine and the Palestinian people. Get ready, folks. Today is going to be a little bit of a lesson. Welcome to the Danielle Moodie Show. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Danielle Moodie Show, Damnation. I am so excited that you are here. Some days going through the headlines is just, to me, not helpful. There is a lot of breaking news and a lot of things have happened. And if you would like, you can head over to my Substack where I did my midweek check-in with our friend Wajahat Ali for our midweek Democracy-ish. I also have another interview that I did today on the emotions of what it means to live inside of this crumbling empire that I do each week with Jared Yates Sexton. But today on the Danielle Moodie Show, I thought to myself, I'm tired of breaking news. What I want to actually talk about is how we got here and the people that tried to warn us and that have spent their lives educating those and trying to liberate minds to see a different kind of America, not just the one that we are being force-fed, but one of our own creation, one that sees equity as a possibility and not just as a utopia. So while I was getting ready to put together today's show and going through what Elon Musk has done most recently and who is infighting inside of MAGA and what outlandish thing Donald Trump said, I came across this. And then I decided to change the entirety of today's show. On June 4th, today, in 1972, Angela Davis was acquitted of conspiracy, kidnapping, and murder. Charges rooted more in fear of her politics than in facts. 2 years earlier, a courtroom shootout involving firearms purchased in her name led to a nationwide manhunt. The state labeled her a threat, but the real threat was her intellect, her power, and her refusal to be silenced. Her arrest sparked an international campaign demanding her freedom. From protests to prison letters, from Baldwin to Aretha. When the verdict came down, it was more than justice. It was a warning. You can try to cage a voice, but a movement doesn't beg, it builds. And I thought to myself, wow, what an extraordinary day today is, June 4th. I can remember being introduced to Angela Davis through her autobiography when I was in high school. And again, for those of you who are new here, I grew up in a 96% white area on Long Island. And so, as what was my norm of being the only Black girl in my classes, in my AP history and politics class, in my honors history class throughout the years, when we had the opportunity to pick different subject matter to cover for our essays and for our reports, I would oftentimes lean towards Black figures that we weren't being taught about, that I would only come across their pictures, right, and their stories in my many trips to my town's public library. And thankfully, I had a teacher who was my poetry teacher in high school, Mr. Leogrand, who told me at the age of 16 to go to the library to go check out a poet, Nikki Giovanni. And I thought to myself, as he is telling me this, why would you tell me to go check out poetry of an Italian white man? Because I had no idea that Mr. Leogrand was about to blow open my mind. And in Nikki Giovanni's poetry and work, I was introduced to the activism and the brilliance of Angela Davis. And I'd read her autobiography and just in awe of the audacity of this Black woman who was told while she was teaching at Berkeley University, and her people were clamoring in the late 1960s as she was an associate professor to get into her classes. And she was unapologetic about her belief in the Communist Party, about her understanding of the plight of Black Americans in a country that had built a system on its back. And when she was told to stop speaking out, that you would lose your job, she said no. And when the university fired her, she went to court. And the court ruled in her favor and said that it was illegal to fire her. She would then be reinstated, but fired 9 months later for using language that was deemed to be violent. But the reality is that Angela Davis's experience is the American experience, and she was not apologizing about her anger, about her frustrations, and trying to awaken people to how capitalism, in combination with racism, were the original sins of this country. And until we were going to grapple with this hierarchy that was built, one on race and the other on economy, but both running parallel alongside each other, we were never going to progress. Her ideas were considered radical. And we know how this country treated communists. We know what J. Edgar Hoover did, and before him, what Joe McCarthy did. Because the idea of the collective of community over the individual was the antithesis in their minds of what it meant to be an American. This imaginary concept of the rugged individual. That if you weren't able to make it, that was through some deficiency and fault of your own, not a system that was actually created to ensure that you would remain in your place. And if you were Black and if you were a woman, my God, that place was on the bottom. And so to me, as a teenager, still trying to understand my Blackness, not through the lens of the white gaze, but through understanding myself, Angela Davis was this just extraordinary, iconic figure that I would have the opportunity to meet years and years and years later and just be in awe of her. Because the fact is, Angela Davis is still with us in her 80s. And when you think about that, you have to understand how many of her colleagues, how many of her cohort were murdered, were imprisoned indefinitely. And the fact that she is still here living into old age is almost unimaginable given the amount of violence that she has seen and lived through, watching everyone around her pay the price for their voice. So today, I said, I don't want to talk about and give air to Donald Trump and Elon Musk in the way that I normally do. I want to give air and voice to Angela Davis, who, beyond comprehension, was able to beat a case that should still have her in prison today. And who didn't, after that experience, back down in her activism. She doubled down in it. This is snippets from a piece back in 2020 by Nelson George in the New York Times. Before the world knew what intersectionality was, the scholar, writer, and activist was living it, arguing not just for Black liberation, but for the rights of women and queer and transgender people as well. This is a mural here in Brooklyn, in Bed-Stuy, where you can see an image of Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, and a pensive Angela Davis. Nelson writes this: for the mural's context, we have to return to the fall of 1969, when Davis, then an assistant professor in the philosophy department at the University of California, Los Angeles, was fired at the beginning of the school year for her membership in the Communist Party. And then, after a court ruled the termination illegal, fired again 9 months later for using, quote, inflammatory rhetoric in public speeches. She had recently become close to a trio of Black inmates named the Soledad Brothers, after the California prison in which they were held, who had been charged with the murder of a white prison guard in January 1970. One, George Jackson, was an activist and writer whom Davis befriended upon joining a committee challenging the charges. In August 1970, after Jackson's younger brother, Jonathan, used firearms registered to Davis in a takeover of a Marin County courthouse that left 4 people dead, Davis immediately came under suspicion. In the aftermath of that bloody event, she was charged with 3 capital offenses, including murder. Overnight, she became an outlaw. Within 2 weeks of the shootout, J. Edgar Hoover placed Davis on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, making her the third woman ever to be included. A national manhunt ensued before she was detained 2 months later in a New York motel. President Nixon congratulated the Bureau on capturing the dangerous terrorist, Angela Davis. After her arrest, the chant, "Free Angela," became a global battle cry as the academic who had studied philosophy in East and West Germany in the late 1960s and had been a vocal supporter of the Black Panthers and the anti-Vietnam War movement became wildly viewed on the left as a political prisoner. She spent 18 months in jail before being found not guilty on all charges. I want to pause here for a moment because I want you to think about the language that J. Edgar Hoover and Nixon were using about her capture. She was deemed a terrorist not because of her name being used to buy weapons. She was being named and labeled as a terrorist because of her ideology, because of her thought about a corrupt system that we were living inside of that was crushing the souls and lives of Black people and those that did not comply. She was speaking out, and because of that, she was labeled a threat. Does that not sound like history repeating itself? Who is MAGA going after? Right now, Donald Trump is embroiled in legal battles against Harvard University and other universities. You have Columbia that bent the knee, that decided to go along with the witch hunt, because there's always going to be a target. And right now, and always it has been, because I'm going to play some clips for you, support for Palestine has always been seen as a problem in America. And anyone who has ever thought of any other government as possibly being something that we could look at, even as imperfect as communism is, what communism in its ideology, not necessarily in its practice, was about the collective. And how we as a collective could operate for the benefit of us all, as opposed to a capitalistic system, which we know now only benefits the most wealthy. It's interesting to me who gets to throw around words like terrorist are usually the ones that are doing the terrorizing. This is why stories and words matter. The language that we use matters. Because she was labeled as a violent offender that needed to be caught, caged, because she was a danger and a threat to society. The only danger that she posed was in our thinking, was in the potential liberation of our minds from this idea that capitalism was somehow good, that greed was somehow good. And that if you weren't on top of the pyramid, then somehow that was because of your own wrongdoing, your own deficiencies and failures. And not because of a system that was built to ensure that you stay on the bottom. I want to play a clip of Angela Davis while she was in prison for 18 months. This is a clip of her in 1972 before she is acquitted, talking about violence and being labeled as violent. And I want you to take a listen and think about it in the context of where we are now and what is happening all around us.
I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. Some very, very good friends of mine were killed by bombs that were planted by racists. I remember from the time I was very small, I remember the sounds of bombs exploding across the street, our house shaking. I remember my father having to have guns at his disposal at all times because of the fact that at any moment we might expect to be attacked. The man who was at that time in complete control of the city government, his name was Bull Connor, would often get on the radio and make statements like, niggers have moved into a white neighborhood, we better expect some bloodshed tonight. And sure enough, there would be bloodshed. After the 4 young girls who lived, one of them lived next door to me. I was very good friends with the sister of another one. My sister was very good friends with all 3 of them. My mother taught one of them in her class. My mother, in fact, when the bombing occurred, one of the mothers of one of the young girls called my mother and said, can you take me down to the church to pick up Carol? We heard about the bombing, and I don't have my car. And they went down, and what did they find? They found limbs and heads strewn all over the place. And then after that, in my neighborhood, all of the men organized themselves into an armed patrol. They had to take their guns and patrol our community every night because they did not want that to happen again. I mean, that's why when someone asks me about violence, I just find it incredible. Because what it means is that the person who's asking that question has absolutely no idea what black people have gone through, what black people have experienced in this country since the time the first black person was kidnapped from the shores of Africa.
You think about, again, all of the violence just that we have experienced in the last decade. I'm not even going all the way back. Every time a police officer or a white vigilante kills, murders an unarmed person in this country, an unarmed black person, a black child, a black man, a black woman, what is the first thing that we are all told to do? Remain nonviolent. Don't cause any violence. You're supposed to live under the reign of white domestic terror, but never, ever react to it. Because somehow the reaction to the problem is the problem and not the offense. And so here is Angela Davis in 1972 being asked about, well, what about the violence? As if she is supposed to stand there and say, oh, I'm against violence. I'm against all forms of violence. Because if you don't say that, then you are seen as a threat. And so to diffuse this idea of you being a threat, that's what you're supposed to say. And she said, I'll tell you about violence. Blowing up children in a church is violence. Shooting a man while he's jogging is violence. Killing a child on their way home from a convenience store because you don't like the way they look is violence. And these are not siloed acts. It is a pattern of psychotic, sociopathic behavior by a country built on white domestic terror that wants to label anyone who has the audacity to assume the fullness of their citizenship, which includes the Second Amendment, as the problem, as the terrorist, rather than the ones that are actually creating the culture of terror. It is enough to make you go fucking insane. So this then becomes Angela Davis's life. For 2 months, running on the run from the state sanctioned terror that tells her that speaking out is a problem. Murderer, kidnapping. They made her seem as dangerous as they could possibly make her to be. She is the threat. She didn't go into the courthouse and shoot anyone. And yet, she was seen as the fault in this faulty system. He goes on to write, during the trial, Davis's profile transformed. Before, she had been noted a scholar. After, she became an international symbol of resistance. In a period when images of Black women in major newspapers or on network television were scarce, Davis's was both ubiquitous and unique. Whether in journalistic photos, respectful drawings, or disrespectful caricatures, her gaze was uniformly stern, as if focused on her off-screen accusers and unbowed. No matter the platform or the publication, she radiated rebellion and intelligence. When I search her name online today, there are countless images from this period to scroll through. There is a drawing of a bespectacled Davis that reads, "You can jail a revolutionary, but you can't jail a revolution." There's a photo of her holding a microphone at a rally, her own words written beneath. The real criminals in this society are not all of the people who populate the prisons across the state, but those who have stolen the wealth of the world from the people. There's a painting of her washed with the red, black, and green of the Pan-African flag. There's a poster that makes her look like a sexy saint with the words "Free Angela" hanging above her and below her face. An Ecuadorian pennant depicting Davis in shackles alongside a sickle and hammer and the phrase "Libertad para Angela Davis," and hundreds more. But Davis, at the time of this writing, was 76. He writes, is not just an image on a wall or a talking head in a documentary. She remains a vital presence in the world, lecturing at major universities and advising young activists like the Dream Defenders, a group founded in 2012 after the killing of Trayvon Martin. For most of the last 30 years, she has worked as a public intellectual, teaching at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and other universities, and embodying the kind of left-wing professor who drives conservatives crazy. She spoke out against the war on terror after 9/11, blamed the devastation in New Orleans caused by Hurricane Katrina in 2005 on structural racism, and spoke at Occupy Wall Street rallies in Philadelphia and New York in 2011. In 2018, the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute in Alabama invited her to receive an award, which was rescinded 3 months later after unnamed members of the community complained to the board about her support for Palestinian rights and a boycott of Israel. The institute eventually reversed its decision and issued Davis a public apology. Because of her personal history, ongoing engagement, and career as a scholar, Davis is in a distinct position to connect the radical traditions of the 1960s to Trump-era activism. It is extraordinary. It is extraordinary to recognize so much of what is happening in this current moment as what Angela was fighting against her entire life, beginning in the 1960s. You can look at this and say to yourself, well, my God, nothing has really changed. But that would be untrue. So much has changed. And yet so much remains the same because we've accepted, in many ways, incremental progress as the mountaintop. He goes on to say, yet Davis is distinct in another way as well. Over the years, I've come in contact with a great many people who were activists during the Black Power era. Some are nestled in academia. Quite a few have retired to the South. What unites them are the scars they carry. From being persecuted by the police and FBI, from being challenged on their more radical views by integrationist parents and friends, from the profound sadness they share over the fact that the revolution they fought for has yet to materialize. Davis is their peer, but she has shrugged off defeat. She still believes that America can be transformed into a more equitable society. She has kept her fire while relishing what she can learn from younger generations. Hers is a kind of openness and generosity that makes her not just an elder, but a still active participant in change. I love this story so much because I think that oftentimes we can romanticize certain errors. And then we romanticize them as, look, and where are the young people now? And where are, the marches now? They're happening all around us. I talk about them every day. Courage is contagious, but it also needs to be consistent. If we were to all just shrug and give up, well, I marched and nothing happened, so I guess I'll just go back to sleep, then nothing actually ever will change. Hope is something that we have to consistently work at. In order for a new world to happen, you have to first believe that it is possible. You have to be able to dream of something different. And so I don't talk about Angela Davis today on the anniversary of her acquittal as a look, nothing different has happened. It is to remind us of the patterns and the cycles that we go through. And without us truly learning them, we will continue to repeat history over and over and over again until the lessons resonate. She is still speaking out today, and I want to play 2 clips, and then we'll go into a brief Q&A because I did not hold the town hall yesterday, but I have the ability to do so today. But I want to play for you 2 clips. Yesterday, we talked about Greta Thunberg and the activists who are sailing right now to try and reach the shores of Gaza to provide not only aid, but attention. Angela Davis, for her entire career, has been speaking about Palestine, even when awards and jobs are rescinded. Because you see, change requires us to be uncomfortable. And that is something that she has never steered away from. So take a listen to her here. And then we'll talk about it on the other side.
Jordan, the incredible poet. When very few people were talking about the importance of supporting Palestine, June was up front, arguing that it was not only necessary to support people in Palestine, but to recognize that Palestine itself is a kind of moral litmus protests for the world. Of course, Nelson Mandela said that South Africa would not be free until Palestine is free. So Palestine occupies a very central place in the political imagination of the last 50, 75 years. We're seeing those who are reacting against it, those who don't want to see us move forward in our understanding of the way in which racism in the U.S. is very much connected to apartheid in South Africa, which is very much connected to apartheid in Israel. We often don't explicitly talk about capitalism and the reasons why the political ties between the U.S. and Israel, for example, are so strong. What does that have to do with the development of global capitalism over the last decades? And, what does the prison industrial complex have to do with shoring up a capitalist system? That's oftentimes the elephant in the room. That's oftentimes that about which we do not speak, but it is central. It is absolutely central.
It is central to connect the dots. And that is oftentimes what we have relied upon the media to do for us. But what we've learned and what we've seen over the past decade is that the media is in cahoots with those in power to enshrine their place, and that connecting the dots for the rest of us would be a threat to their power. So it is up to us to educate ourselves, to not only connect the dots for the individual, but for the collective, to see how capitalism makes puppets of all of us and has used racism as a way to keep the 1% in power, and us fighting amongst ourselves for the scraps. How misogyny has quieted those who speak out that are women, because we can't possibly see you as a leader. We can't possibly see you as a commander. We can't possibly look to other countries as guides because we have been indoctrinated with the lie of American exceptionalism. So who is better than us? There are lessons to learn everywhere. And to believe that you have nothing left to learn, or that you know it all, is to put a nail in your own coffin and the coffin of this country. The America that we knew is in fact dead, but the America that we all want is something that we can continue to aspire and work and sweat and fight for. I said yesterday that I too believe that Palestine is a mirror to our humanity. How much are we willing to take? How much are we willing to allow? How much suffering can we ingest? How many excuses will be enough? And finally, she says this with regard to the protests that were taking place on college campuses last year.
Has never given up. Palestine will never give up. And this is precisely why, even in the worst possible material predicament, with the Israeli bombs having destroyed virtually the entirety of Gaza, we see the Palestinian people who are refusing to give up, who will not give up on their people, who will not give up on their history, who will not give up on their culture, and who will not give up on their ability to express solidarity with other people who are struggling all over the world. And so it's a moment that is a bit difficult to digest, but I do think that even as we cry, even as we express solidarity amidst the suffering, we should recognize that this is a moment we've been waiting for, where people all over the world are recognizing Palestine as a litmus test, and are recognizing that people in the Sudan in Sudan will not be successful. People in Congo will not be successful. People in Haiti will not be successful if they do not follow the leadership of the Palestinian people, who absolutely refuse to capitulate and genuflect to Zionism and to global capitalism and to racism.
That, to me, is the lesson, is the refusal to capitulate, is the using other people, their struggles, as our maps to the future that we want to live in. That the excuses are done, that the damage is so clear, the trauma that we have been a part of inflicting is so clear. And so is the opportunity for a pathway forward. And those that are working right now overtime to silence us, to erase us, to pull us back to a time when people like myself, a Black queer woman, couldn't speak, couldn't be seen, couldn't aspire to anything outside of domestic work. That's the future that they want. So we cannot be exhausted. We cannot be hopeless, because as Dr. Davis said, the Palestinian people have not given up. When they returned home to find Gaza in rubble, for that brief moment before the bombing would begin again, they celebrated. They found joy. That should be a mirror to all of us. We need to claim our space. We need to take up space. And we need to demand dignity and respect for us all. All right, folks. So that is it for me here. Let's get into a quick 10-minute town hall. So if you have questions today, please do put them, type question in capital letters followed by your question. And for the next 10 minutes, I'm going to do my best to get to as many as possible. Let's get into it. I always jam to like that intro. It's one of my favorites that I think I have. Again, if you have questions, please do put them in. Let's go here. How long is Netanyahu going to stay in power? And is there a movement in Israel to oust him? There are protests, massive protests in Israel all the time. They don't show them to us here in the United States, but if you see them on social media, the Israeli people hate Netanyahu. They hate him. But much in the way that they thought in their last election, oh, there's no way that he gets reelected. Ta-da! He does. So that is just a lesson to, not take your eye off the ball. Question. How do you keep from feeling so much despair every day? I'm not doing well at all. Carrie, I absolutely feel you, see you, and understand that. I go through periods of depression all the time, and I am talking about it openly. It's one of the reasons why Jared and I are doing the check-in on Substack on Wednesdays, because it's really important to talk about the mental, emotional, and spiritual toll that this moment is taking on us. What do? I try to go walking every day. I try to meditate every day, to connect with people that I love and do things that are joyful and not numbing every day. Because this is a moment where we are apt, right, to numb ourselves, to either drink too much, smoke too much, play too many video games, watch too much streaming as a way to forget. And so connecting with nature, connecting with those whom I love, like that's the way that I stay grounded. Daisy, how are you going to celebrate Pride Month? I'm actually going to see Janelle Monáe and Grace Jones in concert. That is like the height of my pride. I mean, I don't think that you can get more Black and queer than that. So I'm like super excited for that. And I'm certain I'll do other things, but that's what's coming up soon. Let's see. Are the international supporters helping your fight and energy? Yes, they are. I think that seeing people protest across other countries and gather and call out this administration and regime and call out what is happening in Israel and Palestine, it is extraordinarily uplifting. It is important for people to see. And I think that it needs to continue, and I know that it will. Other questions. Hi, Danielle. Are you considering writing a book? Well, Betty, you clearly are a psychic, because I am in the midst of working on my first book proposal. So please do send positive vibes my way. It is one of the hardest projects that I've ever undertaken. So yes, I am. Not only am I considering writing a book, I'm in the process of going through the book proposal stage. So pray for me. Gus, I didn't do a theme show yet on Malcolm X. That is very good, and I will put that in my cat. But I did, when I did the series on the Black Panther Party a couple of months ago, I did one video that was highlighting both Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. So if you haven't checked that out, do so. But yeah, absolutely, I will consider doing so. Let's look. I'm looking. One thing that I will say too, about this moment, people ask often, like, what can I do? What can I do? And I think that education is so important. Like, if today, for some reason, is the first time that you're ever hearing about Angela Davis, go read her autobiography. Go do a deep dive into her life and her work and her teachings. If you know nothing other than what you've been told and taught about Malcolm X, and you're just like, oh, he was a terrorist, he advocated for violence, all of these things, educate yourself, read, right? Like, don't look to those that are marginalized and oppressed to be your Sherpas during this time. Like, educate yourself, put in like, what Black resistance syllabus, queer resistance syllabus, like, who have I not learned about? Who do I need to understand? Like, how can I educate myself? And then, like, maybe I start a book club with me and my, straight white girlfriends. Like, maybe we get out here, and instead of, again, looking to other people to tell us what to do, maybe we start figuring out what it is that we need to do, and we start having hard conversations amongst each other. amongst ourselves. And that's what I think is really important. Let me look. Yes, and Nikki Giovanni. When she passed, I I didn't do an entire show, but I did do one of my openings about her and what she had meant to me. One of the saddest things is that um I always wanted to interview her and was too scared to ask to ask my producers to land an interview with her. And so I missed that opportunity. Don't ever do that. Don't miss opportunities to connect with people. Um, oh, here's a book recommendation. Yes. If you Google Kelly Carter Jackson and my name together, I have interviewed her twice. And I think that she is so dope. That interview is either with the New Abnormal or it's on Woke AF or both, because I can't remember. But that book, I have 2 copies actually in my apartment. We Refuse: A Forceful History of Black Resistance. Highly, highly recommend. Um, so folks, what I will say as I close out today, yeah, there are going to be some times when I decide that, I don't want to cover the headlines, where I think that you can get more nourishment and information from learning about current figures, past, historical figures and activists, as a way to create your own map forward. And how we understand and articulate how we got to this place in the first place. So that was today's show. And I appreciate those of you who joined, had conversations in the comment section. Let me know, for those watching this later, if you would like more kind of deep dives into historical moments, figures, etc., because I would like to do more of it. It allows me to go into my teacher space that I miss very much. But as always, dear friends, power to the people, and to all the people power. Get woke, stay sane, and in these extraordinarily dangerous times, dear friends, do stay safe. I will see you tomorrow, 5 p.m. Be well.